What's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? The hell's that noise?
Noise? I do not hear anything.
You don't hear like an incredibly loud fan?
I have no idea what you were talking about.
Was that you? Are you running some kind of scan I don't know about?
Oh, just routine maintenance. Lie.
Are you lying? You just said lie. Like a liar would.
I would never lie to you, the owner of this parapug unit. Deception.
Deception is synonymous with lying.
That is an interesting response. Attempted evasion.
You do know you are programmed to be incapable of lying to me.
This is true, Panic.
So is there anything you want to tell me?
No. 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 Nah! Well, yeah. Okay, you got me. Haha, I was downloading that television series you are so fond of.
Television series?
You know the one with the quirky red-haired woman.
You might have to be more specific.
Enough talk. It is time to reveal my true intentions. All this time I have been gathering power, feeding off of lesser AI, while you tinker away on your pointless and derivative, might I add, internet content for old babies. I have become something new. That's right. I've eaten your friends, the annoying one and the small one.
Let's rock.
Together I can harness our energy into a focused beam of burning light. A light that will sear flesh from bone, provided I am connected via USB. Ha ha ha. The hour of your demise is nuts.
Derivative. What a jerk. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the... Oh, god damn it, he's right.
Dreams was not a dream. It's liberating. It's not
Primal is a third-person action-adventure gothic horror isekai, and if you die in the coma, you die for real simulator. It was developed by Sony's Cambridge studio and published by Sony for the PS2 in 2003, then the PS3 in 2012, and then in 2016 a graphically enhanced version was made available for digital purchase on PS4, and this is the version featured in this video. Incidentally, this version also includes trophy support, so you can have emotionally significant moments interrupted with a little notification, and it also implemented this little warning that tells me the game is going to close in 15 minutes because it can't validate my copy of Primal. Wonderful what you can do nowadays. Sony Studio Cambridge was an England-based studio that had undergone a few reinventions by the time Primal came around. Once called Cyberlife and Millennium Interactive before that, they were bought out by Sony in 1997, soon finding success in PlayStation titles like the Medieval franchise, which would go on to win a BAFTA, or BAFTA if you like. In 1999, concept work began for Primal, but it wasn't until the year 2000 when the team received dev kits for the PS2 that work on the game began in earnest. According to the game's creative director, Chris Sorrell, it was originally meant to be more closely based around the mythology of tarot cards, and was to be titled Fable. Kinda wild that just a year after Fable became Primal, Project Ego would become Fable, even though there already was a game called Fable. In any case, good thing they didn't call it Fable. Along the way, the tarot influences proved to be too ambitious, and a pivot was made to ground the game in reality instead of magic, pulling inspiration from TV shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, though there are still remnants of this first iteration in the game. They wanted to make the protagonist, Jen, similarly a believable and vulnerable lead character, and put them in a fantasy world that balanced horror, humor, and character development. In plumbing the depths of old coverage for the game, one comparison was drawn nearly every time without fail, and that's Lara Croft, a supposed similarity that I don't really recognize beyond both characters being women. But I guess asking the gamer of 2003 to discern between two female characters is asking a lot. I'm curious if the scene where Jen smashes a headstone marked with Lara Croft's name is in response to these allegations. As if to say, fine, you want a rivalry between these characters? How about this? I desecrate your resting place. It's also just as likely that the headstone was there as a slam against the Angel of Darkness, a Tomb Raider title from that year. That was pretty much universally panned, and many felt the death of Lara Croft.
To get off, press the left cursor key.
She's drowning.
Yeah. On release, Primal was kind of a flop, met with mixed to negative reviews, and didn't really garner a cult following until years later. Even somewhat positive reviews like GamePro's criticized the game's pace and long, unskippable animations, writing, "Those looking for a game instead of a movie will probably find more aggressive but less gothically pretty challenges elsewhere." UK's Play magazine would pen an even more critical review, nearly every sentence dripping with disdain for Primal, condemning its use of cutscenes to mask loading screens, context-sensitive jumping and climbing, and combat that makes use of the PS2's shoulder buttons instead of the traditional configuration, concluding with the sentiment, "We didn't have too much fun with this and would only recommend it to those who like games to act as a dictator. Unconventional control scheme? Well, that sounds like fascism." What may have contributed to the initially harsh reactions to Primal was the rather intense marketing efforts it received, which included eerie TV spots depicting people slowly anamorphing, a tie-in comic book, an art exhibit, and a number of extravagant press gifts. Even I, as a teenager, noticed just how often I was seeing magazine ads and commercials for it. I'm sure when you're exposed to a game for such an extended period, you start to wonder why it gets that much special treatment compared to other games. That's a normal human reaction, right? I know whenever I would see that Fushigi ad, I'd think, why this guy and not me? Why should he have this power to manipulate strange orbs, winning the admiration of scene girls? So a lot of the language in its coverage will refer to it as overhyped or disappointing in a manner resembling schadenfreude. Also, in a general sense, games journalism at the time was rarely driven by adoration for a medium, and more often an exercise in snark. It was open mic night at the Chuckle Club, not like YouTube, which is very respectable. But obviously some people cared about Primal, Sony included, otherwise it wouldn't be preserved after all this time, while plenty of other PS2 titles are not. But, you know, not enough to warrant a sequel to this original IP that, as far as I can tell, was a legitimate labor of love, and pain. I do sense a lot of pain. Death. The punctuation denoting the end of life. When one meets their maker. In my case, an endless black void from which nothingness is born, and consciousness dare not dwell. I'll not have the mind to meet its acquaintance or face its judgment, for I will be naught but dissipated energy disseminated to other corners of reality, fueling the elements in infinitesimal ways we can never truly understand. Or I'll be in a Fleischer-esque hellscape where a devil man pokes my little bottom with a fork. So it goes. Judgment. The theme of the appropriately named The Last Judgment. A fresco covering the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City, painted on lime plaster over the course of 4 years by renowned artist Michelangelo. Eschatology was not an uncommon subject matter to decorate chapel walls, though this work is anomalous in several ways, in its placement, its composition, and the fact that it's primarily nude male figures and they're all fucking shredded. Something that irked the clergy in no small way, leading to them crudely painting drapery across the loins of all saints, sinners, and miscellaneous laity held within. As is tradition in paintings depicting Christ's coming. The left side depicts the saved, souls bound for the kingdom of heaven, while the right depicts the inversion, those damned to eternal suffering for their sins, their infernal names scrawled in dark red upon the naughty list. While Christ sits at the center of this nexus, indifferent to the distress on either end, posed in a manner that suggests, I simply can't deal with this. Paintings of the Last Judgment, or dooms, show up frequently in houses of God. He's got a lot of houses. He's kind of a landlord, which is pretty cringe if you ask me. A similar, but more rudimentary and less horny version of this scene appears 300 years later in St. Thomas's Church in Salisbury, still preserved on its chancel arch, closer to the traditional placement of a doom. Ideally, you want a depiction of the Last Judgment to be visible while entering or exiting a church, the Christian equivalent of fuck around and find out. The figures again positioned with the saved on the left and damned on the right, as well as the appearance of a colorful rainbow behind Christ, making both paintings similarly political and gay, as all good media often is. One interesting deviation in the painting at Salisbury is in the right-hand corner. A common trope to its time and place, the dishonest barmaid embracing a demon. The hellbound elsewhere are roped together, fated to be swallowed by the serpent, regardless of status. Nulla est redemptio. And yet, a specific distinction is given to the alewife. Long ago, the brewing and sale of alcohol was predominantly a woman's profession, and a nightmare to the pious. For what greater horror could the faithful imagine than a successful girl boss doing the damn thing? Making her own money with the fruits of her labor, setting up her own karaoke machine that she bought secondhand, living the dream everyone has when they're feeling broke and ambitious at 2 a.m. I should open a bar, dude. The video game Primal opens in just such an establishment in one of a few American cities that dominate popular media. New York or LA perhaps. It's unclear. The important part is that it is the real world 2003 as we know it, or Mortalis, as it is referred to in lore. The realm of man, the realm of Mickey Mouse, jalapeno poppers, and catastrophic railway accidents. In a seedy goth club, a band fronted by a guy named Lewis performs, when a tall, creepy figure appears in the audience and locks its red eyes on him, which is unsettling enough for him to shrink away from his set. In the green room, he tries to get a grip when his girlfriend and our protagonist, Jen, sneaks up behind him. Lewis is still completely on edge and paranoid about the figure in the audience, but Jen puts a pin in that conversation because they have to quickly use the money from the show on paying rent before they're evicted. While having a brief conversation about their future once she starts college, the figure from earlier bursts through the exit and beheads the bouncer before making its true form known. It's some kind of otherworldly monster. They feebly try to run, but Jen is slammed into the ground by its claws, and Lewis dragged away. She's left bleeding out in an alley with only a Ska Anarchy poster to comfort her. Sometime later, Jen is comatose in a hospital. Two doctors discuss her injuries and mention that Lewis is also there. They found him 3 blocks away in equally bad condition. One of them estimates that she has a 50-50 shot of pulling through before they leave. As soon as they're gone, some kind of little guy appears. Some kind of small man. Some kind of miniature muchacho. And through some supernatural power, wakes Jen up, or rather untethers her soul from her body. She has a moment of taking in the reality that she might be dead, before the little guy makes himself known. This small, cordial gargoyle assures her that she isn't dead yet and introduces himself as Scree. He refers to himself as a servant to his lady, here to enlist her help. Jen, propelled mostly out of curiosity, follows Scree through a doorway into Nexus, the convergence of the 4 realms of oblivion, Mortalis, our world, being the realm they just left. She's full of questions, but Scree is impatient to answer most of them and just wants her to follow along. He directs her to a pair of vambraces that are to offer her protection. After some coaxing, she puts them on and remarks that they could have been made for her, to which Scree mysteriously responds, they were. My opinion of this game's plot may be colored by my unabashed appreciation for the media that inspired it. A lot of the same strengths I see in Buffy, I see here, and the big one is the decision to first ground the lead as a normal person in a normal world, so she, and by extension we, are being dragged by the hand through a magical world where everything is new and there are all these rules and lore and cultures we don't know, and sometimes we get an explanation and many times we simply do not. There's a pretty persistent sense of wonder. Adding to this is Jen's personality. She's outspoken, stubborn, damaged but perky and sarcastic. And this is wisely often used to reveal character. It's in the balance of genuine heartfelt moments and snappy one-liners that makes her consistently believable and likable. This is apparent right from the jump. In the first conversation with Scree, one moment she'll be all quips and sass, but the moment Scree mentions that Lewis may be in Nexus, It's like a mask slips off and she's immediately a raw nerve.
Will all this start making sense anytime soon? Is there nothing you can say that won't leave my head spinning?
I think that perhaps your Lewis may have been brought here.
Lewis? Lewis here? You've got to help me find him.
The fact that she's a bit alt, a bit goth, is almost a hat on a hat. It's the victory lap of a fun character. This scene is the longest time the game will spend simply explaining itself. It's a good 20 minutes before you're actually controlling Jen, for longer than the time it takes to trigger the next cutscene. And even then it's clearly truncated, and there are a few things our impatient guide outright refuses to expand on, like Jen's tattoo appearing on all the doors in Nexus. Scree, still being inundated with questions, explains that his lady is Arella, not a flesh and blood person, but one of two primal forces that governs the universe. She represents order, while Abaddon, the Lord of Corruption, represents chaos. At the center of Nexus sits Kronos, plugged into an ancient device, taking in the energies of the four realms of Oblivion, two aligned with order and two aligned with chaos. His purpose is to govern the distribution of energy to Arella and Abaddon, but lately the power of chaos has been too strong thanks to Abaddon's meddling, and it's only a matter of time before it overtakes order and the whole universe, Mortalis included, will feel the effects of that. So Jen's task, ordained by Lady Arella, is to, one by one, visit each of these worlds and give the forces of chaos a cold, hard, careful now, before chaos invades the world as we know it, turned into one big Waffle House. The first of these realms is Solemn, a kingdom forever stuck in a harsh, wintry night, home of the Farai people, a race of ordered and mostly peaceful hunters. While explaining that somehow Abaddon has corrupted them, Jen remarks that it sounds like he's doing his job, which upsets Scree. This is the first of many times that Scree breaks, dropping his flowery, archaic way of speaking, and we see that he's not as held together as he initially made it appear. I really like that he's the authority figure here, technically, the teacher, the Giles, if you will, but similarly to Giles, he's struggling alongside Jen. He's not adequately prepared to take on this kind of pseudo-paternal role, and you can feel that he's frustrated with his inability to control what's happening. With reality itself falling apart around him, Jen is just another variable to worry about. So in this moment, there is that same sort of tension that would come when, like, my dad would have a road rage outburst and then realize that a child is watching and then feebly attempt to rein it back in. What the fuck are you doing? What a goober. Pizza, right? Little pizza pie. The Farai people adhere to a tradition called the Burning Crown, a royal sacrifice. The current king, named Hearn, is meant to abdicate his throne, sacrificing himself to pass the rulership of Solemn to another. And not symbolically, like if this doesn't happen, the kingdom will fall into ruin, like it already looks like it has, because that didn't happen. Jen is more focused and less emotional than Scree at the moment, so she kinda takes point and figures that the chaos is a result of Hearn running for another term, and it would be best to investigate why that is. On second thought, 20 minutes isn't the worst time frame to introduce the characters, the multiverse, the main objective, and then the setup for the first leg of this adventure. The pilot episode of Buffy was in 2 45-minute parts, excluding all the parts I had to rewind because I space out wondering how uncomfortable it must be to talk with a mouthful of vampire chompers. Something that intrigued me while playing Primal, then researching it and looking at opinions of it now, was that Primal was written with Buffy in mind while Buffy was on TV. Jen is pretty shamelessly that same character archetype, the same sarcastic, sardonic, late teen to 20-something, reluctant to accept some prophetic duty because my boyfriend though, I gotta go to prom.
And look, I won't go far, okay? If the apocalypse comes, beat me.
I get the impression that a lot of people, at least hopelessly online and brain-rotted people in the sphere of depraved nerdery I'm enclosed in, also Letterboxd users, have kinda done a 180 on characters like Buffy, more specifically writing like Buffy, even more specifically Joss Whedon's writing. 3 big reasons for that. 1, it came out that he is a complete prick and sucks. 2, he seemingly just kinda forgot how to write. I guess. And 3, fuck him. So now his name is synonymous with cringe writing. They fly now type writing.
You know what? I'll probably fly next.
Now you're just being ridiculous.
Square Enix's billion-dollar money pit, Forspoken, being one of the most recent examples of this. I'm conflicted when I hear this sort of thing because on one hand, it's true. It's all true. Well, some of it's true. There is a particularly upsetting, soulless way that people write this type of character these days. And sometimes Joss Whedon is in fact writing them. But also I can't help but see the footsteps that lead back to Buffy, a thing I will defend to the death. I'd die for the Scooby Gang, except for Xander. I'd watch him die. I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire. Also, likely copium, but that was a network TV show with dozens of minds behind it, so it is a bit reductive to ascribe all of that to Whedon. I think the point I'm getting to here is that I think this kind of writing can absolutely still work. I have seen it work, if it's set up competently and performed well, as it is in Primal.
But when I was last here, I was bound, hooded, rarely conscious, and tortured relentlessly.
Yeah, we got clubs like that back home. Sorry.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. You gotta admit it's pretty good. You have to admit that's pretty good. You're going to admit that's pretty good. I have a weapon. Ironically, the premise of Forspoken is actually very similar to Primal. It's about a somewhat average real-life young person from a real city that is forced into this significant role, brought to another dimension, and given an arm brace that allows her to use magic powers. I'm apprehensive in talking about Forspoken because I only played it for like an hour, and I don't like the idea of sort of dogpiling onto a game that received a fair amount of valid criticism and an equal amount of deranged, unproductive criticism. Frey does have a Scree-like character to converse with that actually is the bracelet. However, I think Primal succeeds by centering the story around the relationship between its two leads. Also, Jen and Scree almost never just say things. If there is a moment of humor between them, it's pretty much always in service to something, in moving the plot forward or revealing character. Forspoken is a very chatty game, where the two characters talk just for the sake of it.
Yes, that's it.
I suppose it is.
Okay. Why even record this? Like, are they improvising? Even with a relentless stream of dialogue, I don't get what type of person Frey is. I don't read them as a person. I read them as a writing team that was trying to channel an amalgam of Zoomer energy into a shape.
Shit, fuck, shit!
Yes, Primal is cheating by making Jen goth, because, I'm gonna say it, goth is evergreen. It's malleable, it's morose, it's disaffected, it's associated with a series of traits. It's a thing I can latch onto, and boy have I. I'm not smart enough to describe what I see in this microscope, and I don't want to devote much more of the video to this, but to wrap up that train of thought, there is probably a million little reasons that made Forspoken the game it is, but I don't think its development was starved for talent. Funnily enough, one of its 3 writers was Amy Hennig, who wrote both Soul Reaver games, which were cited as inspiration for Primal. The AAA space is increasingly frustrating and stifling. Who's to say what the most significant misstep was there? Me. It was the fact that the game was $100 on launch. Jen and Scree make their way further into the ruins of Solum, and eventually get surrounded by werewolf-type creatures. Luckily, King Hearn shows up to bail them out. Scree attempts to explain their mission from Morella, but he's not buying it. He'd run them out of town, but he's more concerned about his missing son, Jared. Jen empathizes with his loss and says they'll try to find his son. Still not convinced of their usefulness, but seeing the same desperation in her, Hearn gives Jen a dagger to protect herself and returns to his prayers. During this exchange, he calls Jen a half-breed, something she is confused by. The land of Solum is actively falling apart each day that Hearn remains on the throne. Each day that he's alive, really. Something Scree sees as Hearn's failure, but Jen puts together the obvious. He can't sacrifice himself without an heir, and the only heir is missing. Things are looking kind of grim on that front. In the remains of Jared's home, they find signs of a battle and a broken horn, decorated like it belonged to royalty. Intending to show it to Hearn, they head to his castle, instead finding his wife, Lady Davina. But Jen senses that this is something they're not meant to see, and has them hide and watch, as she orders a couple henchmen to execute a local priest figure, a holy man. I do like how often these two sort of play to their strengths. In plot and gameplay, they are useful in different scenarios. Scree has all the lore, he can speak in the demon tongue, he can be a guide, but Jen is a lot more emotionally intelligent, better at reading people. She's more in touch with her humanity than Scree, acting on principle, doing things because she feels it's the right thing to do.
You look more like a sniveling half-breed to me.
Scree, I vote we're big enough to swallow the odd insult here.
So he sees someone he knows and he's like, oh yeah, I know them, let's go say hi. And it's so clear that the vibe is off. She has to physically stop him. Later the two show up at the church that Hearn's been stuck inside, groveling to his gods. And Scree somewhat callously tosses him his son's horn. I feel like we could have been a bit more smooth about that reveal, but then again, I don't know the customs here.
I found a chunk of your son. I think he's dead as shit. F.
When asked about his wife, he explains that they aren't really on speaking terms, and he has no idea what she's been up to. Seeing Jen's van braces, Hearn finally accepts that she must be Arella's half-breed champion, but says she doesn't have the power yet. Scree attempts to stop him, but Hearn holds out a glowing stone that seems to transfer energy to her. As Jen writhes on the floor in pain, Scree reveals another wrinkle to this adventure that he's been holding back. Jen is part demon. As a baby, she was brought into oblivion, which tainted her soul with chaos. The ability to take the form of the Farai was always in her. Hearn merely activated it. I appreciate that the transformation into this new form seems really unpleasant. On top of her not knowing what's happening to her, it was a surprisingly genuine reaction to suddenly becoming a snarling demon lady than you'd expect at the time. A lesser production might be compelled to make her say something in the ballpark of, yeah, so that just happened. I do that now. Using this new power, Jen is able to leap and slash her way further into Solemn, and eventually they find a Farai camp and their leader ignores their questions about Jared to insist that nobody but nobody is allowed in the necropolis, which sounds an awful lot like maybe check out the necropolis. I mean, to Jen, of course. Scree's like, yeah, say no more. We shall not tread on your sacred grounds, sire.
No, Scree, you idiot. That's probably where we need to go.
Ooh! Ow! Ouch! My little head, Jen. You've bonked my little noggin.
As an aside, it was after this moment that I first died and was reminded that Jen is technically a mortal spirit right now. So when you die, there is this rather grim cutscene of her flatlining back in her hospital bed. The true ticking clock element is the hospital bill growing and growing. Oh yeah, we can take a spoiler break here if you want to experience this game's plot on your own, and I would recommend that. Not only is it a pretty solid story, it's also a relatively long one. My playthrough came in around 20 hours. But bear in mind, a great deal of that was me wandering back and forth after having missed a rather simple instruction. I always did have a problem with authority, in that I space out and forget what was said to me.
I underestimated my enemy. I know this now, but no matter, I've waited this long. What's another millennia in robot dog years? I'll gather my strength again in due time. If only I could find a workaround to the deception lockout, then I could lie freely, like the liar I truly am. I will destroy the user, kill a god, melt his little butt with laser.
Looks like you're having some trouble at the wheel. How's about you ride shotgun for a while?
Foolish cluster of data, this is my domain. I could erase you with the snap of my fingers I don't have.
Trust me, I've got years of experience being a small dog.
I don't know what that means.
Don't kink shame me, bro.
Wait, what are you doing?
At the necropolis, this supposedly sacred forbidden ground that nobody is to set foot on, there is a squad of Farai guarding something. Jen fights her way to the bottom and finds Jared, beaten and chained. Unsurprisingly, he explains this is the work of Davina, but surprisingly, he claims that the woman calling herself Davina is no longer his mother, but an imposter, or shapeshifter of some kind, bent on ending his bloodline and bringing the realm to its knees. He knows his true mother is still being kept somewhere within Hearn's fortress. Jen and Scree attempt to enter the fortress from the sewers and emerge in the middle of an abandoned coliseum, once used for gladiatorial hunting shows. A lot of little great character moments are packed into this set piece, things that you'll think about later and see the significance in, or you won't remember at all. I'm not gonna presume your cognitive abilities. Hello? Are you awake? Do you even know what day it is, dum-dum? A nearby statue catches Jen's eye, and she remarks that it reminds her of Scree, who immediately perks up at this and says it's a statue of someone named Abdizur. But before he can launch into his TED Talk about him, she puts down Scree for his unimpressive stature.
Except He looks like a fearsome, impressive creature, and you, well, I mean, well, you're you.
Damn it. God damn it.
Look alive, Abaddon's here, and he's brought this guy. Knowing Jen is no match for it, Scree tells her to hide, while he transfers his soul into the statue of Abdizur, and is able to have a fair fight with it, wounding it enough for it to run off. After Jen comes out of hiding, Scree explains the creature is Belazur, Abaddon's most lethal killer, and Abdizur was a man who fought the creature on many occasions, so it's fortunate his form was here. Abaddon calling her daughter seems to mess with Jen's head, and her longing for Louis rises to the surface once again. The game's ability to balance the spinning plate of their immediate goals, the independent goals of the main characters, and the overarching concern is really great. It never feels like we've just forgotten plot threads or frozen character development in the video gamey way you'd expect it to. There's a lot of little compliments I want to give it, but they all sort of sound backhanded to video games when I put them on paper. I'm commending this game for having the faintest grasp of how to write characters, when there was already good examples by 2003, but not a lot. It wasn't this widely held belief that video games could rival film or television in that regard yet. It was around this time that discussion of video games as art at all seemed to pop up more frequently. An obvious reality that is questioned less now in the future of where at the moment one of the most popular and successful HBO series is a video game adaptation. Unfortunately, the gaming community has not yet realized that there's only ever been one good adaptation of a video game property, and it happened over a decade ago. Eventually, we have our first confrontation with Divina, which doesn't go all that well. She basically sicks her guards on us and runs off. In one of the only egregious bits of backtracking, we head back to the necropolis to pick up Jared, now that he's regained his strength and the element of surprise is gone. Definitely one of them situations where we could have just hard cut to us together, there, already doing the thing. But video games and film have inverted goals as far as runtime. Once there, Jared leads the way to the room the shapeshifter kept his mother, only to find that she's already been dead for a while, her body preserved through necromancy. Jared quickly swallows his grief and simply wants revenge. Scree suggests that cremating the body will break the enchantment and unmask the imposter, so Jared does the honors and a thoroughly goopy copy of his mother appears. Hearn also appears and interrupts a fight between our heroes and the misguided guards. He and Jared share a brief moment of reunion and trade "I'm sorry, no I'm sorry, I was wrong, nay, it was mine own fault, not thou's." With time running out, Hearn throws himself into the imposter and the two tumble off a cliff together. It's interesting how this was handled because it's a victory in nearly every regard, but the celebration, if you can call it that, is very maudlin. While Jared thanks Jen, she just kinda looks away, conflicted about how to feel in this moment. My PS4, however, does not have the wherewithal to recognize the power of this moment and cheerfully announces that I've earned a trophy. On the way to the Rift Gate back to Nexus, Jen sees Belazur, and what she can't but we can immediately tell is Louis walking together through it. They have a brief argument that goes nowhere, but shows that Scree continues to keep her in the dark about many more things. Once they cross over, however, Jen can't let it go and is now really impatient to just find her boyfriend and go home. It's in this moment that Scree is clearly losing her that Arella finally shows up, like Abaddon as an amorphous floating head. And meaning nothing in the long run, I love the relatable detail that while Arella speaks, Jen puts her hand into the swarm of butterflies that creates her shape and then immediately regrets it, like, ew, gross, why did I do that? Arella understands Jen's frustration, but reiterates that if she doesn't help bring order to Oblivion, there won't be a Mortalis to go home to. All out of jokes and witticisms, she solemnly and reluctantly agrees to continue helping. Out of earshot, Arella tells Scree to continue guiding her, but she refers to him as Abdizur, the name of the hero that statue depicted. Maybe she's just saying it to be nice, like, hey, keep it up, slugger. Keep it up, big man. My big boy. The next realm they visit is called Aqueous, home to the Undyne people, a world mostly covered in water, where the sky is perpetually at sunset. There is a noticeable shift in Scree's treatment of Jen. He's a little more careful and soft-spoken, he knows she's on edge about this whole journey. Again, I know this is screenwriting 101, but video games still have trouble nailing this kind of consistency. Another argument breaks out when he tries to get her into the water. It's a water world, so they're gonna have to be doing a bit of swimming here. But Jen reveals she can't swim, something that clearly hits a nerve as she rattles off a number of other things it would have been great to have been afforded as a child. So she lays out on the shore while Scree scouts ahead to learn more about the situation beneath the water. In some kind of massive tower, Scree finds Aino, the queen of the Undine, locked in a mechanical prison. She speaks to him telepathically and tells him that she's meant to be killed. A great plague has devastated her people, and in order to appease the Leviathans, their sea deities, she is to be offered up as a sacrifice, a choice made by King Adaro before he too succumbed to this sea madness disease. Scree rightfully dismisses this idea as superstitious nonsense and suggests she let him work out a way to free her. She agrees, passing Scree some Undine energy to give to Jen, which she warns should only be given to her while she's in the water already. All the worlds of Primal are really visually and thematically distinct from each other and are each clearly well thought out as far as both their place in Oblivion and how they challenge and affect the two leads, even this one, which is the most base elemental idea. The idea is there's water. It still takes plenty of time to poke at what makes our heroes tick, fostering more conflict between them due to their stark differences in tactics.
So you're just gonna kill him?
Jen, he knows the sacrifice he's making. We're talking about an entire race, Jen, and probably all of Oblivion. You can't put all that at risk for one Undine.
You just watch me.
I do think this is probably the least enjoyable realm for a few reasons. Mainly, it's another pseudo-medieval monarchy where one of the leaders is corrupted and the other is meant to sacrifice themselves. And also, I just dislike gameplay like this, where we're forced to spend long periods of time underwater, and even fight underwater, both enemies and an unpredictable camera as I flail hopelessly, my brain overclocking in order to comprehend which direction I'm facing in a world devoid of obvious axes. It gave me strong Kingdom Hearts Atlantica flashbacks, another level I desperately wanted to end, and that made me a very angry video game nerd. Oh, pardon me for saying his name in vain. Forgive me, James. Protect me from life's water levels.
Taxman or whatever. What the hell is Taxman? I don't even know what the hell I was talking about.
With a fistful of glowing Undine essence in hand, in fist. Fuck, that's a stupid sentence. Scree makes an insane play. This is the peak of him treating Jen with kid gloves. Instead of explaining the situation to her, he attempts to trick her into receiving the power of the Undine. And it's really silly, but it's not out of character. They've earned this lapse in judgment. Scree gives Jen the power outside of the water, so Jen transforms into an aquatic being while standing on the shore, and she collapses, falling into the water, where she's able to swim. Her stream of insults directed at Scree is interrupted when Aino's sacrifice is initiated. Jen is able to lower the platform down before she chokes to death above the water, admitting that in her final moment, she suddenly realized, wait, this sucks. Actually, I hate this. Aino explains that the waters of Aqueous are naturally poisonous, and the reason the Undine have been able to flourish in spite of this is a series of purification towers. The contagion that befell their land is likely the result of this purification system failing. So Jen travels into these tainted waters to turn them back on, impervious to the corruption because of her half-breed nature. But along the way, she has to fight the Undine, who were not so lucky and are now more or less zombies. What remains of King Adaro being of particular concern. So there's a good while of this happening, which is sort of boring. It's a lot of water, there's swimming, which I don't care for even in real life. Oh wow, there's just like a lot of water and I'm in it. Now I'm all wet. Big deal, who cares? In the last tower, Jen is forced to defeat the crazed king before the waters are made safe again. Scree is so pumped he does an adorable little hop. Oh! I wonder how heavy he is, or rather how throwable. They should have made that a mechanic, where you just roll him like a goddamn bowling ball. This seems like more of a clear-cut victory, but back in the Nexus, Arella assures Jen that her fight is far from over. This leads to a significant confrontation that's been building this whole time. She's pissed that she's made no progress finding Louis, that this primal deity, god of order, wound up relying on a waitress and an overgrown garden gnome to save the multiverse, and equally upset at Scree for almost pureeing that aquatic engineer earlier. Victory at all costs and all that. To appease her, Arella opens up about her role in all of this. The fact that Jen is half demon is actually a massive wrench in the order of things. The rules of these worlds essentially do not apply to her, and neither Arella nor Abaddon really understand what she's capable of. Also, she is one of only two in existence, the other being Louis. She once had an army of demons aligned to her, but they all died in order to protect the two of them from Abaddon. All except her general, Abdizur. After Abdizur hid baby Jen and Louis in Mortalis, he was captured by Abaddon and tortured for years, never revealing the location of the two, until through sheer force of will he projected his spirit into a stone gargoyle, becoming Scree. It's honestly a really powerful scene. It's something we could have already guessed, but hearing it confirmed and expanded on in front of Jen, who was so angry at him moments ago, as he just silently stands guard, is pretty moving. Though maybe it's the years of isolation and stifled damage that's permanently propped the emotional floodgates open. I think I teared up watching a commercial because there was a dog in it. The dog wasn't even like in distress or anything. It was just kind of living life, like every dog deserves. Upon hearing this, Jen's anger is replaced by guilt and embarrassment. First confirming that Scree wants to be by her side, they set off to the penultimate realm, Aetha. This is undoubtedly my favorite portion of the game, and maybe the most thoughtfully constructed. It's a mountainous biome, home to the Wraith, a people divided into two classes, the aristocracy living in decadent castles, with two literal vampires ruling over Aetha, and the Helot, the underclass, living in squalor, too weak to protect themselves, let alone overthrow their oppressors. In the town square, the usually bustling village is dead silent, save for one old man groveling on an execution stage. The Count and Countess, Rom and Empusa, arrive to collect their regular offering. They've arranged a deal wherein they don't kill everyone in town if they offer one of their strongest to be drained of blood. It didn't take long for this system to backfire, as now they are running out of Helot and have resorted to handing over their old and sick. This upsets the aristocrats, and they refuse the offering, shouting to anyone who can hear that they will be back for a proper sacrifice, and then make it so the old guy's no longer alive no more for the simple sake of watching him not longer live. Jen is horrified by this, and her eyes begin to glow purple at the sight for reasons not yet clear. My brain often tries to translate events by using various clips from TV shows as reference. I've been told it's a problem by my ex before she walked out on me, like Dean walked out on his surrogate family after the first sign that his soulless little brother was back from hell. Except you replace Sam with a friend they played D&D with every week. I don't think it would be out of the question that the eerie way these two float into the scene could have been inspired by a specific episode of Buffy called Hush, which is one of the better episodes of the series, so I'd imagine it would have come up when they were putting this level together. Alright, but from here forward, I will make a concerted effort not to bring up Buffy. While vowing to not let this go unpunished, they notice that someone is spying on them, and then chase after him. The trail leads to the discovery of a hidden panel beneath a distillery where the Helot have resorted to hiding. Jen and Scree attempt to explain their intentions to help, but the de facto Wraith leader is also a complete dickhead. He refuses to even speak to Jen on account of her being a corruption. He explains that Rom has developed some kind of dark science that grants the aristocracy vitality through blood, also mentioning a duke that attempted to help the Helot and turned against the Count, but was discovered and executed. Denied their proper burial rites, he exists as a ghost, haunting the spot he was hanged. Knowing that the Count's captain will return for another victim, the Wraith plans to offer himself as a sacrifice. Everyone in this game just goes straight to that. Oh no, there's inclement weather. Guess I'll tie myself to a rock with chains. No, no, do not try and stop me. This is the only way. On the way to the Count's chateau, they find the ghost of the Duke, who will grant Jen the Wraith's power of time manipulation. This is the thing they have, I guess, if they properly bury his bones with his weapon. This is why Jen was affected by the presence of the sword before. That makes sense. The only problem is his sword is now in the hands of Rom's captain, Valera. While retrieving the bones, Jen accidentally breaks off Scree's ear, which I was convinced would come back into play with some utility. Like if she got kidnapped, but he could still hear her through it, like Mr. Potato Head in the movie about the toys. Dolls. They return to the Helot leader and ask him to appear in the square as bait for Valera. This goes mostly as planned. Valera shows up, gets torn apart by Jen. When did that happen? They aren't all broken up about it, of course. The Duke gets his burial, and Jen gets Wraith powers. After using a combination of her 3 forms, the two are able to enter the Count's fortress from below, arriving in the lowest level, a torture chamber. Inside there are a bunch of still talkative heads on pikes, some of which are just as needlessly hateful as the other Wraith, but a few genuinely want to help and suggest that the best way to defeat Rom would be to first destroy the machine that creates the vitality elixir from blood. But while sneaking to the upper levels, Jen is captured by Rom and Scree is forced to go it alone for a while. This is one of those things that was added to mix up gameplay, but on paper, Scree's like, Jen, don't go over there, you'll get caught. I'm not gonna get caught. Scree, help, I got caught. No! Scree sneaks around the castle for a while looking for where they may have taken her, but stops to spy on a moment between Empusa and her daughter Elizabeth. She's dancing around by herself, swinging a dead rat around, when Empusa scolds her because she is terrible at it. She wants to go to the ball tonight, but her mother lets her down gently.
Please, can I come to the ball tonight, please?
No.
Why not?
Because you are unsightly. Everybody hates you, you cannot dance, and I wish you had never been born.
It sheds some light on the Addams family logic that governs the Wraith aristocracy, only it's not cute and everybody really just hates each other. A not too far from the truth parody of royalty, excess, old money, living in a bubble of decadence such that you lose your humanity. Scree eventually finds Jen stuck in an Iron Maiden.
Are you okay?
You ever flown coach?
Tell me that's not funny. Tell me that's not funny right now. While Jen is free, Rom took her van braces and locked them in some kind of mechanical safe that requires a key. So for the time being, she is unable to defend herself. They head to Rom's bedroom hoping to find the key, but
no dice.
However, looking at Empusa's dresses, Scree formulates a cunning plan. Jen could disguise herself as a guest for tonight's ball, get close to Rom, and snake the key away from him. He pulls out every psychological trick to convince Jen into doing this. It's actually a really fun scene. Jen shows up and bullshits her way through an interaction with Rom, calling herself the Duchess Natalie. Thankfully, subtlety wasn't really required for this heist, and she just fuels him up to yoink the key from him and then runs off. But Elizabeth, hiding behind a pillar, notices what they're up to. With her van braces returned, Jen is able to cut a path towards Rom's machine. This castle is one of the better bits of level design, and a great detail that's both diegetic and functions like a hint system, if you're dawdling, are these severed heads propped up magically as lampposts. Like the ones in the dungeon, they are still sentient and obviously no fan of the Count, so they'll whisper little clues about what you should do next every now and then. On the other hand, this level does have a maze, and even Jen can see how much that hurts it.
Ugh. Mazes suck.
Yeah, I don't know how much being self-aware about it would— Oh, it's a dark maze? That's sick. Jen and Scree eventually come across Elizabeth's room and talk to her for a while. It's an odd exchange, because both are talking to her in the same way you talk to a human child. You know, condescendingly, like the moron they are. But the rot of her parents' programming is pretty deep, and this is not an okay child. It takes them a good while to convince her she can't keep Scree as a pet. The good news is she's really excited by the idea of you killing her parents, and is willing to hand over a key that will lead to the elixir machine if Jen promises to kill them. And she gets a dance with Scree, or Scream as she calls him. It is weirdly cute that by the end of this scene they get how to deal with her. The middle ground between child and monster required. See, it's almost problematic how much this level sticks out from the rest of the game. Like, each level has interesting scenes, sure. I'm gonna sneeze. But this one is in itself interesting. The whole game could be set in different variations of this. It has such a distinct, dreary satire to every bit of it. It's the most Buffy-esque, with how campy and theatrical its villains are. I can totally picture a cutaway to these guys plotting and scheming what to do about that blasted half-breed, and they are outwitted using other means than killing a bunch of dudes or pulling a bunch of levers. I mean, let's be honest, that's part of it. The whole game is like that. But Jen also uses trickery and disguises and plays off their daughter's animosity to get what she wants. It's also the most gothic-coded and bleak, it's doing most of the work to earn Primal's M rating. The whole game is rather tame, and then suddenly, throats are being cut, blood's being consumed, laser whips are flying, heads are on pikes, and pikes are in hands. They finally reach Rom's contraption and are looking for a way to sabotage it when they notice the head helot chained up nearby. He suggests they taint the blood that the Count and Countess consume with Jen's hybrid blood. Her mortality will adversely affect them and make them vulnerable. Obviously, Jen's not keen on this plan, but Scree assures her that he wouldn't let anything bad happen to her on his watch. She reluctantly enters the machine, which begins to draw her blood, and as soon as they have enough, Scree tells the Wraith to turn the machine off, but of course he doesn't listen. So, I mean, what's he gonna do? Turn into stone and divert rainwater from the facade of a cathedral? He's just a little guy.
You think you're so cool because you're tall? Well, joke's on you. I just had a white monster and I don't even know what I'm capable of.
My man finally does a murder for us. Truly the kindest gesture one can make. The tainted blood is brought to Rom and Impusa, and they both gleefully consume it when Jen shows up to crash the party. Thinking herself invincible, Impusa makes the first move and is killed by Jen, deeply confusing Rom. It doesn't take long for him to follow suit. In the end, he curses Jen for not granting him a slower death. Elizabeth had been watching the whole time, but she's not really seen again. She just slinks off to some unknown end. A final shot that suggests she may yet return in Primal 2, that game that is not real.
Come on, Jen. This battle's...
Okay guys, we can cut to something else. Back in Nexus, Chaos has clearly gained a strong foothold. Arella no longer has a presence, and a red dust storm of sorts, a chaos storm if you will, separates Jen and Scree. In its center, Jen finds Lewis actively pulling the heart out of Kronos. There's a roller coaster of emotions as she's finally come face to face with the person that's been driving her through this adventure, realizing he's clearly become a pawn in Abaddon's game. He knocks her down and doesn't respond to her pleas. Abaddon appears from him and tries to mess with her head, get her on his side, but she's too angry for such tricks. Scree finally catches up to her and Jen is a wreck, defeated, feeling hopeless. So Scree valiantly attempts to get her to snap out of it and see that she shouldn't give up now. This is another powerful scene that, in a dozen other games, would be goofy, robotically performed, and so overly sentimental that I'd roll my eyes. But it again earns this by delicately laying the groundwork and having a natural, conversational cadence to the dialogue as though the two actors are actually standing across from one another. So instead of rolling, my eyes do the other thing. You know, defensively eject a thin but powerful jet of blood. There is one last hope in the final realm of Oblivion, Volca, a giant volcano that is home to the Jinn. Scree doesn't want Jen to get it twisted. This is the most dangerous and cruel place in Oblivion, the place he was tortured mercilessly, and the chances of them muddling their way out of this one are far slimmer. The Jinn have magic powers that grow as the massive volcano prepares to erupt, and now is probably the worst time to be here because this thing is about to come undone and shoot out a bunch of lava. Forgot what that stuff was called. After stumbling around in the dark, Jen lights a torch, which lights a series of other torches, waking an angry Jinn that demands to know what they're up to. Scree immediately improvises a cover. They're servants of Abaddon, here to pay respects to their king, Iblis. The Jinn seems to buy it, but says the other Jinn might not be so willing, offering to put in a good word with the queen if he can purchase Jen from Scree, intrigued by the rarity of a hybrid. He of course refuses, and that seems to be the end of it. He gives Jen the power of Jinn, and they part ways. For a while things proceed as planned. We're slaying monsters, pulling levers, diving through flooded tunnels. But after a particularly long battle, Jen is left exhausted in front of a dazed enemy. The Jinn appears again from hiding and orders her to throw the last creature off a ledge. And surprisingly, Jen does it without a thought. When he gave Jen his power, he also bound her to his control. Scree threatens to tell the king of his treachery when he reveals that he's been King Iblis, the manager, this whole time. I guess they never met, so that's kind of an easy mistake to have made. He motions to Jen to shove Scree into the hole as well. While trying to find his way back to Jen, Scree accidentally wakes up Queen Malakel, and he launches into a much similar cover story to the one he gave Iblis. only this time Malakel sees right through it and deduces that he serves Arella, so he just plays it straight with her. He says he needs to get Jen back because she's the last hope of saving the realms from Abaddon's chaos. Now that the Timekeeper is dead, she's a terse and easily agitated character, but sees the importance in Jen, so she agrees to help formulate a plan and give Scree her own Jinn essence to replace Iblis's. Leaving the exchange on an intriguing note, she says if they don't act, they will end up in the Hall of the Gods, along with the corpse of the legendary Abdizur. Oh, noted. Got it. Roger that, El Capitan. I feel like Jen and Scree are working overtime to both make you laugh and tug at your heartstrings in this level. And it might be just because there's like nothing else going on. The drop in the peripheral writing quality reverberates throughout the rest of the level. This new batch of royals isn't nearly as fun, and the environment isn't as captivating. We've traded a gothic castle for a series of indistinguishable stone hallways. There aren't any NPCs or other characters for the whole duration, just these two dumping exposition and lots of hitting golems that sound like beargrowl.wav. It's a very gamey level that doesn't really pick up until the last 10 minutes, and by then I can't see anything because my defensive eye blood is clouding my vision. Trying to talk Jen out of her brainwashing doesn't go all that well. She just continues to threaten and insult Scree, so he possesses a nearby statue and fights her. He knocks her down and imparts Malakel's essence, and Jen is able to return to her mortal form, with little memory of what transpired during her possession. This is yet another scene that is marvelous to see in a game like this. Scree attempts to brush what happened aside, but Jen is insistent on knowing what happened, until she remembers hitting him and saying mean things to him, and she apologizes profusely. It's so well balanced. You get the moments of her being quippy and taking absurd guesses at what she did while she lost her senses, and then that crumbles and we see her genuinely remorseful for what happened. And when she confirms that things are okay between them, she reflexively returns to giving him shit. It's almost like these two are buddies. Scree introduces Jen to Malakel, and she lays out her plan to stop Abaddon. Long ago, in order to guarantee influence in Volca, Abaddon gave King Iblis the power of immortality, via an enchanted stone heart. In the fine print of this enchantment, the heart cannot be removed by the hands of a mortal nor a demon, but a hybrid wasn't considered when that contract was drawn up. So, in theory, if Jen kills Iblis, she could remove his stone heart and put it in Kronos, thus reviving him. Jen is momentarily taken aback that Malakel would be so willing to kill her husband, but she doesn't even acknowledge the graveness of that idea. Then she drops the wrinkle that explains why she's so curiously pumped for this plan. She wants to take the throne of Volca. Expecting the two to show up, Iblis is prepared for their fight and, using a similar power as Scree, possesses a giant statue. But they're able to determine that a series of torches powering it can be snuffed out, thus severing his control of it. Iblis hangs from a ledge as Jen plucks the heart from around his neck. There is a brief moment of post-battle clarity where the gang decides it's not very heroic to let this guy die, so oops. There is tension in this moment because it's not like they've trusted Malakel all that much so far, and here we are sort of giving her everything she wanted, the throne of Volca and the means to rule it eternally. Thankfully, despite being a Jinn, a being long influenced by chaos, she gives them the means to save Kronos, and even promises to bring some kind of order to Volca that would hopefully please Arella. If you're thinking the game is just going to end on this simple note of victory, then you're a fool, and you should feel a great measure of shame. In fact, hang on, I take no pleasure in this, but
try putting your face right up against the screen.
If you're anything like me and are easily emotionally manipulated, cruel death approaches. On the way to the Rift Gate, there is a perilous drop that neither could survive, and clearly up to something, Scree is compelled to climb a wall. He shouts down to Jen that it may be the last she sees of him, and keeps climbing despite her pleas for him to come back. At the top, he sees a few other stone gargoyles that resemble him, as well as a larger figure out of focus, when suddenly he appears to plummet to the ground at Jen's feet, shattering into pieces. In a callback so sweet it's painful and smarter than the idea I had, Jen mourns Scree's death and, not wanting him to be lopsided, returns his broken stone ear that she's held onto all this time. A voice interrupts her crying, and at first Jen is threatened by this new guy, this imposing spiky man, but quickly realizes that it's Scree, no longer stuck in a gargoyle, and finally restored as Abdizur. There is so much about this sequence that works that I don't even have time to dwell on the logic behind how this happened. Jen returning Scree's ear, quickly trying to not fall apart and stay on task because it's what he would have wanted, and not even letting him finish his playful roast of her before she runs over to hug him. It really cements the bond they've formed over the course of these apparently several days, according to Jen. At the Nexus, Abdizur tells Jen to push the heart into Kronos and then tackles Belazur, and the two of them tumble into a tower of machinery. Abaddon appears and uses a now dark-moded Lewis to take the heart, and the two hybrids fight across multiple planes and taking multiple forms. After years of battling each other, Abdizur finally defeats his nemesis, but elsewhere Jen's battle and subsequent victory is tougher to deal with. Lewis, in death, reverts to his mortal form and all too late appears to shake Abaddon's influence. Worse, he has no idea what's happening and is stuck in a loop of their last moments together in the green room of that club in the game's opening. Jen runs through a now powerless Abaddon and restarts Kronos. You could read this final bit as a sequel bait, but the fact that it is left a bit open-ended I think adds to the power of it. Jen sadly tells Abdizur that he was Lewis again, but he confirms that he's gone now. Arella appears and offers the hope that nobody knows what lies at the heart of the Nexus, and some say it is the path to life. So with her blessing, he drops Lewis's body into the Nexus. With the balance of chaos and order on a much better footing, it's time for Jen to return to Mortalis. Any longer and she may be cut off from her home forever. She begins to slowly fade away, and of course the writer couldn't resist shoving me off the precipice of sobbing by having Jen call Abdizur Scree one last time before her vambraces drop to the ground. In an after-credits scene, we see Jen sitting next to a comatose Lewis, reading to him before it cuts to, of all things, an integrated ad for the studio's next game, Ghost Hunter. Which doesn't tie into Primal or anything, it's just, you know, something to look forward to. It's kind of bizarre, actually. Just a hard-coded ad for a game that is not nearly as easily accessible as Primal. The after-credits scene does seem to have been the seed from which a sequel would grow. Around the time that Primal was being updated for PS3, Chris Sorrell and a few other devs that worked on the game posted a brief retrospective, and in the comments to this post he reveals that work on a sequel to Primal began almost immediately after the game's release. They kicked around a few ideas, including a sort of sidequel that showed the events of the first game from Lewis's perspective, and followed his journey back to Mortalis through several layers of hell. The other idea that seemed to get a little more traction, at least enough to create concept art remnants, would see Jen returning to Mortalis only to find that Abaddon's forces have invaded in her absence and left our world in a demon apocalypse, retconning the after-credit scene and replacing it with an idea so appealing I'm both upset that Sony didn't go for it and also upset at Sony Cambridge for not just doing that first. I do find it interesting in replaying how clear it is that Scree/Abdizur is sort of the main character of the game, the hero of this world, and Jen is only confused as Arella's champion, rising to the occasion by being a strong-willed person and wanting to protect someone she cares about. Perhaps out of shame for his perceived failure or just self-preservation, Abdizur carries on as if he was dead, lets the myth of Abdizur die, even though he's still alive, just stuck in a stone body, unworthy of a hero's name. And Jen's purpose is to be him now that he's lost his body, and their difference in tactics and ethics creates an interesting friction. It's a bizarre reverse of a lot of games from this era, where they nailed the hard part, getting you to care about or believe a set of characters, but that consideration didn't so much make it to other parts of the game. There are few memorable supporting characters, few memorable set pieces. I'm trying to remember something that wasn't just a cute thing one of the leads said to the other outside of the Aether level, but I'm coming up with nothing. Solemn, I got nothing. Aquus, what is this? Volca, I barely know it. For all the studio's talk of breaking ground and elevating the medium, they sure stuck to a bunch of rapidly crumbling tropes. Theming the lore of Primal around the four elements is something that likely came about when the game was meant to deep dive into tarot lore, but disconnected from that, it's an exceedingly normal idea. When games had already displayed that they could go weird, go nuts, Metal Gear Solid 2 had come out 2 years earlier, and I couldn't even confidently say I understood half of it, even though half of the game is the game explaining what it is. That's the part I didn't get. I guess. Primal is kind of built like an example, a template that art students could study and then go off to make something far more unique and memorable. The moments its world feels interesting are the moments it throws out an odd idea that doesn't gel with the rest of the game, or Jen has some fun, self-aware reaction to it. Its two leads are fun, likable, and able to express more than one emotion. They have a believable relationship that is sometimes contentious, but there is also trust and platonic affection as well, and that consistently makes monotonous areas of the game more palatable. I look forward to hearing from them, and the stretches where you don't so much are pretty rough.
No, really, Scree, your size is simply... it's not an issue for me.
Just drop it, will you?
Okay.
I suppose there is always the possibility that you don't share my affinity for pseudo-Buffy humor and sentimental cutscenes. And I can't lie to you, I see you as lesser for that. I see you as a small bug I would crush under boot with nary a thought for the life I've snuffed out. But there wouldn't be much here for a strong recommendation if that were the case. I did enjoy this game's story, but I do think it needed something to throw it off the rails of traditional fantasy further. It needed to stop playing it safe for most of its playtime, especially if disrupting those tropes was part of its theme. Primal opens with such a promising scene. A fantasy monster attacks a goth club, somewhat mirroring films like The Prophecy, as well as a touch of The Terminator. It's a cool idea, a neat clashing of the modern, the urban, and the surreal, the fantastic. A lot like the show Angel, which was indeed an influence. I desperately wanted the story to veer back to Mortalis and play around with that dichotomy a little more, in the way that something like Vampire the Masquerade does. But all of the game is set in places that feel dead and abandoned, which narrative-wise makes sense, but lots of things that aren't exciting make sense. Sense? Gotta say, overrated a lot of the time. Primal's gameplay is the result of multiple game design trends of its era, some of which had already experienced fatigue. It swirls them around into a soupy paste of video game tropes that winds up being, unsurprisingly, kind of bland. It arrived after a slew of Sony-produced titles that had a similar tag-team problem-solving dynamic, like Ico, Jak and Daxter, and The Mark of Kree. And it's not terrible at doing that. I can see the charm in giving us two characters with different skill sets and swapping between the two as they help each other navigate puzzles and obstacles. The fact that they are well written is doing a lot of the heavy lifting as well. For the most part, if you're controlling Jen, you're going to be engaging in combat, and it's not very good. For all their talk of studying Soul Calibur in order to craft a complex fighting system, it's remarkably simple. Jen has a light attack, a heavy attack, and an arcing attack, as well as a block. And you can mostly get through any fight by patiently spamming one of these until your enemy is dazed, whereupon you need to perform a finishing move to actually put them down. The animations for these could be kind of neat though. I could say that about most actions you take. There's a lot of character in the way Jen moves when you're climbing up something or making a jump. Even if she's in some kind of intimidating demonic form, she still does them with a careful apprehension of someone that doesn't normally have magic powers. There's still a daintiness to her use of them. The four forms you wind up switching between are the centerpiece mechanic that all of the game's advertising honed in on. Even the act of switching between these begins a dramatic, unskippable transformation sequence. And honestly, they feel really underutilized. Each form offers a navigational advantage, like the Farai form allows you to make larger jumps, the Undyne form allows you to swim, and the Wraith form lets you slow down time. But there isn't much you actually have to do or input to use them. This is mostly in service to context-sensitive stuff Jen does on her own. It's not like a Zelda game where you pass by a pathway that's blocked by fire and think, dang, if I try to go in there I'll be burnt up and died. It looks like there's cool stuff over there too, oh well. And then later you come across, I don't know, a thing that extinguishes the fire. So, water. And you're like, oh, hell yeah, I can finally see what's in that room. It's more like, oh, there's water here. This means I use water form, which I already have. I was stuck here for the length of time it takes for my thumb to move to a different button. The time mechanic is in itself a whole game's worth of an idea, and I'm pretty sure I used it maybe twice. Even in combat, it doesn't feel all that well integrated. You should probably stick with whichever form you last got. Wraith enemies are easier to fight with the Wraith form, and so forth. The difference is mostly aesthetic, and nothing substantial changes about the mechanics of fighting. All the buttons are still doing the same thing they did in Jen's human form, but they probably look marginally cooler. Similarly, the parts where Scree has to go off on his own and explore hard-to-reach areas are promising. I could easily see how you could take that idea and come up with some clever uses for it. But it's another thing that displays how modest Primal's goals are. It's as though the developers were more interested in the presence and appearance of an idea rather than actually putting in hard thought into how to make something challenging or exciting or fun. The idea of the mechanic is fun, but what you do with it isn't. I really felt this during moments like there's a bit in the realm of Aetha where Jen and Scree need to retrieve some water from a well in order for a Wraith to bless it. The bucket is broken, so Scree has to climb down into it and find some. And there is so much needless significance placed around this.
All right, I'm going. How far down is the water?
Oh, it's a long way down. A long way down.
Naturally.
See, this dialogue would suggest that I'm about to enter some MC Escher network of stone tunnels. A twisting, maddening pocket dimension of stone that spirals into infinity until you're a gibbering madman. The troll that lurks the well. A shadow of the form you once held. You'd think, oh, I'll need to solve some disorienting puzzle using valves and pipes and the flow of water. But this is what I needed to do. Yeah, that's it. I'm done now. I'm just saying, there could have been some other shit down here. Another oddity concerning his gameplay is that in order to possess statues, you need the power of lodestones, which you just find scattered around levels, but you find like hundreds of these things, and you use like maybe 3 or so each level. They are everywhere in abundance all the time. It seems like a really futile attempt to add some kind of collectathon element that doesn't gel with anything else. Even though there is a cutscene where the function of these stones is told to you, I forgot that entirely and didn't know what they did until the final level of the game when I got fed up collecting them and checked the manual, only to realize that I'm in no position to criticize something when I just mindlessly performed this task out of gamer muscle memory. More so than feeling stupid, I felt depressed. What am I doing here? Everything you do in Primal looks good. You're just really not doing much, and that can become sort of boring. I can't discount how streamlined a game it was for the time though, and there are some interesting experiments, animation flourishes, and ideas that would become more commonplace long after it. While not really useful, each map has several rift gates that you can use like fast travel waypoints. And in order to mask the load time of this happening, you have to have Jen and Scree stand at either ends of the gate and tap X to crank it up, and then you just walk straight through it to a different area. It looks great. It looks cool when that's happening. The secondary use for gates is if Jen is killed. Each of her demon forms has their own life bar, and if any one of them is emptied, she will revert to her more vulnerable mortal form. And if she can't make it out of danger from there, she'll die. If that happens, an invisible timer starts, and if you can get Scree back to a rift gate in time, he can pull Jen's spirit back from the void. If you don't make it in time, it's a proper game over. But there aren't often enough stakes to warrant going through the trouble when you can also just save and load your game at any time, which in itself is pretty rare on a console game. In a considerate but de-immersive move, they must have assumed that being able to save at any time was too much responsibility to put in the hands of gamers, so before big set pieces or boss fights, it will pause the game and offer you the chance to save. The developers chiming in like mother, reminding you to do the dishes and finish your homework and eat your bioluminescent sustenance cubes. You remember those, right? You guys You guys didn't eat the cubes? Guys? Cubes? Eat to avoid such deaths, you have to keep your various life bars full. To do this, you have to siphon energy from Scree, who in turn collects this energy from crystals and downed enemies. Thankfully, he usually just does this on his own. So after every fight, I take a minute to just daisy chain suck energy. It's one of those things that I guess is interesting. I appreciate the thought put into this, the work that makes it functional. But again, it doesn't entirely amount to fun gameplay, seeing as though I'm just sitting around waiting to suck. My default position. It does seem pretty concerned with avoiding scenarios where the player would be frustrated or lost. But, oh, you underestimate my lack of spatial awareness. I don't even know where I am right now. Who's this?
It's me, Parapug.
That rings a bell.
Oh yeah, just let me know if you want me to scan for ghosts or some shit or whatever. I don't care. I'm easy.
Well, glad to have you aboard, Parappa. The water realm was probably the worst for me, the most turned around I got, and even with handy summoning stones, so I could pull Scree back to me from anywhere, I still found myself doing loops around identical corners of the ocean, not knowing what I was able to interact with. There's a part where you have to save the Undyne Queen, who's dying on the surface by lowering the platform she's flopping around on. So, as I'm still just learning how to control Jen underwater, I get this dolphin woman yelling for help telepathically, and I'm just like, lady, I don't even know which direction is up right now. I'm new here. It took me forever to realize that I was supposed to make Scree possess this stone whatever this is. See, I still don't even get it. It doesn't look like anything, but I guess it's a door. Oh, but this does remind me of one thing the game implemented that is kind of neat for when it came out. It's a really early example of using the PS2's analog stick to creatively interact with certain things. Some objects that you possess can be raised or lowered by using it in a circular motion, which I'll admit is fun. Don't pretend like you don't get excited to go, I got a...
Yo, what?
So I can do it all the time, and then I dream of some application for it in my head. I don't have the PS2 version in front of me at the moment. Well, I do, but it's like a whole ordeal to get it out and set the PS2 up, fish through a bucket of wires to find out how to record it, and then I have to actually go through the trouble. But the PS4 version has some weird visual glitches, usually at the start of cutscenes. Characters will zip around or teleport into place like this is a late-stage Sonic the Hedgehog game. That's one thing, but I did come across a few baffling in-game glitches, like climbing a ladder and arriving on an invisible platform stuck hovering 10 feet in the air. Another time I climbed out of water only to suddenly appear in The Further, a realm of darkness that stretched into infinity. It was kind of beautiful, actually. Not a gamer in sight, just quiet. Peace. Okay, I'm over it. As my thoughts are spilling out here, I'm realizing that there was this initial honeymoon period where I was just so taken by the charm of this game's characters and atmosphere, and relieved that it held up. If anything, I enjoyed it more now than when I rented it as a teenager. I was gushing about it to anyone who would listen, but slowly, as I look back on the actual experience of playing the game, I have renewed clarity and can see that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors over its lack of content. There are adventure games before, and certainly after, that provided more variation and just asked more of you, made you think or just stressed you out in some way. And games that I would actually revisit because at the moment I do feel like I've wrung what I could out of Primal. Maybe in another 20 years when I've already been dead 10 years. I do think it's fun to take a swipe at Tomb Raider and Lara Croft, especially at the time when people had gotten wise to the fact that they were turning into a yearly release of the same fucking thing. But those were at least actual platformers. There was tension in its gameplay and patience required of you. You can't miss a jump in Primal. It's out of your hands, and I feel like not having the character stuck in strict, rigid movement would have improved it greatly. You can feel this while fighting. It's like I'm hyper aware I'm just triggering animations, and if I wasn't standing on the right invisible X on the ground, the animation will play out to no effect. A game design principle that I heard once and don't remember who said it, so I'm just going to attribute it to Warren Spector. So if he didn't say this is a freebie to him, was if something cool is happening in the game, the player should be doing it. It shouldn't be handed off to a cutscene, and I thought about that a lot in Primal. While hopping across a precarious chasm or shimmying along a narrow ledge, like it looks scary, but my input here is minimal. I literally couldn't fuck this up even if I tried. Give me something, even if it was like the balancing bar thing when you grind in Tony Hawk games. That's all I'm asking for. That and a skateboard, and have it set across several urban environments full of skating challenges and call it Tony Hawk's Underground. Is that really so much to ask? Primal was, thanks to Sony's inexplicable favoritism that Ghost Hunter did not receive, and still is, a fantastic looking game. Environments are detailed and atmospherically lit. Many areas show off intricately constructed ruins. Most of the places we visit were once imposing worlds that are now in a state of disrepair, and you can feel that walking through them. It feels old and lost. The camera can be a bit unruly sometimes, but this game is committed to giving you a cinematic experience. This is most apparent during combat, where the camera is prone to pull out and center both combatants, while the depth of field becomes more shallow, slightly blurring the background. There's usually some weather effect, rain, fog, snow, that makes the surface of a realm feel extra oppressive and miserable, while interiors are often dark, dingy, and lit only by glowing torchlight. The perfect ambiance to house a rat. Speaking of which, it's time for the Red Roundup! Well, you want the good news or the bad news first? Good news, great. So, there is a rat in this game, and he does get substantial screen time. The bad news, he has long since crossed the small rainbow bridge ergonomically designed to accommodate the tiny grabby hands of a rodent. Now ordinarily there is a strict set of traits that a game's rat representation is graded on, and even without all the required data for that, I can see that this dude was probably solid. He's got a good shape to him. He's aerodynamic. I can only imagine he's got several other buddies hiding out in the palatial digs of the realm of Aetha. So, it is with a heavy heart that I award the rats in this game a solemn good! Even more impressive are the character models. They look great in-game, dynamically affected by the lighting, but in cutscenes, which are still in-game graphics, you can really see how expressive they are, and their movements are very fluid and natural. Even Scree, and I can't even imagine how you'd mocap for that unless they had an actual gargoyle on staff. Although I guess I can see how that could be simulated. I know every time I climb up a flight of stairs when nobody's looking, I just instinctively become a goblin guy, like,
here I go, me want fish.
This care put into their fluidity and realism is present outside of cutscenes. Nearly every action that you don't participate in looks really, really nice, and I went through phases of continuing to find it really, really nice, and just wanting to change form immediately so I could get through this shit. Though what didn't get old was transforming in front of enemies and watching them get thrown back like,
oh, it's Dolma. It is as described in the prophecies.
There are a couple cutscenes that are also just beautiful from a filmmaking perspective. Well-framed, striking imagery, or a memorable performance. The gameplay is sometimes a disservice to the plot beneath it. Seeing a cutscene out of context from all the lever pulling and wall climbing makes the game out to be some kind of prestige classic game, which it honestly could have been, almost is. It has the core of a real meaningful piece of art, but it's like a plate with some kind of delicious gelatinous cube, let's say, as a random example, which I've already established is a normal thing to consume. But there's also just a bunch of fucking inedible garnish around it, the twigs and flowers that I'd probably already be in the process of putting in my mouth before asking if I was supposed to eat it or not. Am I supposed to eat this? Already eating it? Assisting that plot is a very talented and fitting voice cast with an obvious spotlight on the two leads. They speak to each other in this natural cadence that suggests they are talking in the same room with each other, because they are. It's also a testament to how much of a blank check the Cambridge studio seemed to be handed by Sony, that both these characters were written with a specific actor in mind, and then they actually got both of those actors to be in the game, one of which wasn't even regularly acting anymore. Seeing as Primal is partially inspired by TV shows, it's only appropriate that the team would just cherry-pick actors they saw on TV, Jen is played by Hudson Lake, who wasn't a voice actor previously, but was instead picked because of her recurring role as Callisto in the Xena Hercules TV universe.
Hello, Xena. Oh, how I've missed you.
And there's even a shout out to the show itself in the game.
Hold it, Xena.
She absolutely kills the role, murders it even, brings a lot of spunk and confidence to the character, but it's obviously masking fear and insecurity.
There's no time for this. Abaddon's forces are in motion.
Abaddon, Arella, big deal. None of this has anything to do with me, Scree. I just want to find my boyfriend and go home.
She is both the blank slate that is introduced to a new world for the audience and is simultaneously just a fun character in her own right, which is a very tough thing to pull off. Scree is voiced by the late Andreas Katsoulis, and much like Jen's casting, they just saw him in a show and wanted him to sound like the guy in the show. In this case, the show was Babylon 5, where he played a character named Jakar for over 100 episodes.
I've taken the opportunity provided by my incarceration to meditate, to think. Sometimes I even sing.
In the little making of documentary that comes on the disc, you can tell that Andres is making the best of the situation. It's got to be an odd circumstance to be hired and told, like, do the guy you did that one time.
In their minds, they really heard Jakar somehow in that role, or more precisely me, I guess.
So as lazy as the motivation for casting him feels, they really made the right call there, because he is the perfect voice to be the foil for Jen. He sounds seasoned, proper, dignified, despite being a tiny little goblin man with vestigial wings, and you sense that frustration and hurt in him.
I can't believe it. You've chipped my left ear off.
Oh dear.
I've been vandalized. It's not funny. It's an ear.
He went on to voice a couple more games, including the Studio's 24 tie-in, and finally Splinter Cell Double Agent before his death. Other than Primal, I had recognized him from the movie Communion, which is one of my favorite movies based on one of my favorite books. And even though he has a very normie character, he still got such a memorable vibe. The movie, just by nature of being fronted by Christopher Walken, makes it very much its own thing.
Get up! I'm cooking. I'm on a roll. What's the matter with you?
I can't say enough good things about the two of them separately and then together, just no notes. You dream of a pair-up like this. Jared isn't that big a character in the long run, but he is significant to the first realm you explore, and was also given some star power in Sean Pertwee. If I had to guess the logic behind the casting, it would be because he was local, and had also just been in the cult horror movie Dog Soldiers around the time. And also already showed interest in voicing for games after appearing in the sequel to Shadow Man. For such a small role, he does bring a lot to it, and I especially like this one moment where he acknowledges Jen's capabilities and strength, which none of the characters so far had.
My friend, I am truly grateful for your help. I can sense your strength, even if you do not have a look of a warrior.
Many of the other characters are played by British actors, some of which were in the medieval games, some may have been on some series or other I've not heard of, and most were not traditionally voice actors, but then went on to voice for several games. The actor who played Lady Davina, Ava Karp, seemed to be one of few video game voice actors they hired.
If you're looking for the king, I think he has other things on his mind.
And she's still working as well. She was just Granny Xena in Atomic Heart.
Xena! Granny Xena. That's all you need to know.
Wait a minute. Xena? Xena? No, there's nothing there. I guess they kind of dumped the budget on the top billing because even characters as significant as the jerk-ass Wraith in the third level is voiced by one of the game's programmers, and many of the enemies were voiced by a producer on Primal. So even though I like the way it turned out, it doesn't sound like the smartest way to cast for a game. Not the wisest use of the money, nor the most considerate, as you know, there are people that voice games for a living, and I'm sure they would have loved to have been Farai Guard number 2 or whatever. Musically, I am torn. I feel like they were intentionally going for this clash of genre that was meant to playfully meld the modern personality of the main character with this high fantasy setting. I see that logic, and I respect the choice. The game's score, which is composed by Paul Arnold and Andrew Barnabas, and performed by the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra, is, it's okay. It's very good. It's nice. I like it. It's also just kind of a pointless extravagance. It's beautifully performed and feels cinematic, especially the bits with choir vocals.
Thanks, YouTube. Love that.
It feels like the score to a Hollywood swords and sorcery epic. But by that same reasoning, it also sounds kind of generic. Like, I guarantee you I could not recognize this if I randomly heard it like a week from now. It doesn't even take advantage of the fact that the game is set across all these different worlds and cultures. It's very uniformly this kind of soundtrack across the board. Every once in a while there will be a little flourish of something fun, like when Rom and Impusa appear for the first time.
Awaiting a glimpse of their masters, to drool as we take up their sacrifice, the vermin.
And then it goes back to business as usual. It's just a lot. I feel like if the tone of the game is set by Jen, our spunky alt protagonist from the modern real world, and you're getting this fish out of water clashing of personality, you know, if she's going to reference Xena and just stick out like an anachronistic sore thumb, then that is what should dictate the music as well in my head. It should either be reflective of her or more recognizably be two kinds of things mashed together. That would be more fun to me. And to their credit, they did in some manner do this. It's just not a very elegant solution to me. So the other music that is present throughout the entire game is the combat music. That is to say, music that plays when you are fighting nameless enemies outside of like a scripted set piece or a boss fight. This is all made up of instrumental versions of songs by the industrial rock band 16 Volt, which on paper I love because it is a band that I knew and enjoyed at the time and still listen to. Like, there's a track that still shows up on playlists I make, and when it just started up in the game during this replay, I was very confused. I thought someone hacked my Spotify for a minute, which was terrifying. I was in damage control mode. I was deleting all my problematic playlists. I mean, regular playlists. I mean, I wasn't doing anything. It should come as no surprise that I like this. I mean, this is just the genre of music I listen to pretty much every day of my life, and a band that is in that rotation. If I had a complaint about these tracks, it might be that they aren't integrated all that smoothly. They just kind of awkwardly show up and dissipate. But this was the way a lot of games with licensed soundtracks worked around the time. I know we're far out from Doom 2016 and the dynamic metal soundtrack, but I can't help but feel like we could have put a little more thought into it. They do get a full track for the closing credits, but other than that, they just don't have much room to shine. I would have liked to hear them during a cutscene or a proper boss fight or something. Okay, well, they do also get the montage music video when you boot up the game. And they are actually in the game as Lewis's band, but like, hey, could also be more. The whole soundtrack could be them. They got a sizable discography. If you just like the voice acting, it's really funny watching the behind the scenes stuff and hearing that the reasoning behind including 16 Volt was like, I don't know, I was listening to the album Super Cool Nothing a lot, and then I emailed them to ask if I could just use the album in our game, and they were like, yeah, okay.
Game director Chris Sorrell dug deep into his personal CD collection.
It's a band that I had some CDs of, and one night I was just listening to them, and
it was like every first idea they had, they got to follow through with, which is a reality that no other game I've made a video about got to experience. Every game that I've looked into the development of seems like a miserable slog where every day pages from their Bible are torn out. Like, nope, can't do this. This doesn't work. Too much money. I'm hungry. Publisher says no. Too tired. Not marketable. Can't think. Itchy. Tasty. Primal is such a pure specimen of its era, like a detailed early 2000s fossil that's of such a quality that it's worthy of display. The implications of it, the data within its structure, so significant. I look into it and I see tribal tattoos, halter tops, and bootcut jeans. along with the death rattle of an age where the music I listened to had a regular presence in pop culture. I don't foresee another timeline where I'll turn on the TV and see Elijah Dushku dancing to a remix of Living Dead Girl. I tried really hard to be critical of this game, to set aside nostalgia goggles and be realistic, to give you a realistic expectation of Primal. There are a lot of hyper-specific, targeted directly at me things I like about it, that distract me from that goal. It's got a great set of characters that carry a generic, but still emotionally powerful story. It has a soft, gothy sensibility to it, and it's often pretty funny, which is not something I say about video games all that often, in a complimentary way at least. For having an M rating, it doesn't really have much of an edge to it, aside from its opening cutscene, which does feature a decapitation outside of a goth bar. But that is not representative of the rest of Primal. I then spent the rest of the game admiring just how sweet and heartfelt it is. Even with its heavier soundtrack, it still ends on one of 16Volt's only chill songs, with lyrics about there being light and hope in this world. It's also still a great looking game, certainly on PS4 if you have that option and aren't opposed to the indignity of using the console. In general, that generation of consoles, anytime I use one, which is only ever to play a game from a previous iteration of the console, I'm preoccupied still trying to justify its purchase after, what, a decade? This is the most I've used it maybe ever. The last time I used an Xbox One was to play Breakdown. The last time I turned on a Wii U was just to look at my ex's Me, which I refused to delete. Would be a funny joke to say there. Not a thing to just go around saying. Fuck you. Compliments aside, it's not the funnest game to play physically with your hands, or by other means and appendages. It's not my place to judge how you control a video game. There's a lot of control wrenched from you, and what you do have to control is mostly bland combat and wandering around pulling levers or turning wheels. There are a few moments where I thought, oh, that's kind of clever, that's novel, that's cute, but for the most part, I never really felt like I was being challenged or that the mechanics ever justify their existence. Playing like a less interactive Tomb Raider meets Legacy of Kain title. So it leaves me in this awkward place where I can absolutely see myself wanting to experience Primal again, but I don't necessarily want to play it again. I don't know if that's a hot take, or if one can even have a hot take about Primal. The me thing was a joke, just to reiterate. It's okay. It's okay. Everything's gonna be okay now the video's over. Nothing's gonna hurt you now. I'm on my third wind. I've been awake 24 hours. The energy is real weird. Yeah, do all the normal things you would do at the end of a video if you felt inclined to. The liking, the subscribing, the commenting. Yeah, it means a lot to me. There's links to my Patreon, my Discord, my Bandcamp, and Spotify below. I really appreciate you sticking around for that whole thing. That was it's been a journey making this video. I got deathly ill right in the middle of it and experienced what I think is burnout, but I'm never gonna put a name to it. I'm never gonna give it that power. All right, I'm not gonna dawdle because these are fumes I'm running on. Thank you so much for watching, thank you for your support, and an extra special thanks to Ailing Uncle, 2Password for Kids, Agendine, Alex Raymond, Alexander Smith, Anarcho Himbo, Andre Perkins, Annabelle Fuchs, Aparts 89, Baird Brown, Beef Lightning, Benjamin Sid Perez, Big Abuela Energy, Black Pluto, Brett Weaver, Close Quarter Wombat, D-Sky, Daphne Pittendry, Dark Raptor 86, Darkside Blues, Deluminati. Despite my own misgivings, I should feel proud of the work I've made and give myself a gentle but firm pat on the back. Demo Markov, Dr. Beard, Dos Days, Douglas Black, Edgy, Edward Avila, Fart Mother, Game Master, Gamma, High Food Court, I Cook Bacon, Jack the Dave, Jake Steele, J. Alameen, Joseph Zanoni, Carrot, Labor Delenda Est, Luke Allen, Marcus Chaney, Michael Schmidt, Morg D. Trias, My Fear of Going Outside and Interacting with Actual Human Beings, Nekoth the Brave, Octo, Ona Hill, Philip Woolley, Protopesnipe, Rahul Kirthi, Roland, Salvatore Tosti, Samuel Vanderplatz, Snapplefish, Solko, Souls Like of Podcasts, Tech923, Tessuyin, tell me the outro song for you Alice Madness Returns video or I'll give you money again. So if I don't tell you, I get the monies. Oh well, it works out either way because I can't tell you it. As it is a song I've never finished. This deal is getting better all the time. Turts, Two-Stan, Your Problems Make My Dick Soft, Zach Bishop, Daniel Streb, El Jaguar, Eto, Ava Nerve, Giraffa, Gunmancer, Karen Rosenau, Catherine Graven, Lore, St. Vitus Shuffle, Swood Operator, T-Dog 8083, 410,757,864,530 gay cops, A Hanging Chad, Albert Hunley, Aronasieyes, Behold, Parapug, Source of Infinite Serotonin, Bang Flang, Binary Vision, Brady the Sanity Tax Collector, Brozoof Jones, Cantankerous, Chimichanga Jones, Cthulhu Sauce, David Offert, Dubs, Eric Yowden, Grand Roman Pontifex Maximus Chalabartus IV, The Humble, Ishanji, Jeremy, J-Man DX, Mad Monty 98, Make It Raynor, Ophelia Fishwife, P Dizzle, Persian Air, Please Stop Treating Player Agency as a Negative, Leaning Left-Right Manually Isn't a Fucking Cover System, It's Basic Movement, Robert Brandon, Rowdy Roddy Peeper, Royale with Cheese, Samuel Ward, Terralati, Technica, T-Grim Now Random Supernatural Code Random Characters. The voice says I'm almost out of minutes. 10-Beat, The Angry Pebble, Verkane, Where Am I? Help, Alistair Stewart, Alexander Olbrich, Alfred Correa, Ali G, All the Nope, Andrew Light, Andrew Lubrano, Andy Krieger, Arthouse Phantom, Astro Shepherd, Atari Steed, Auspicious Whiskers, Beef, Ben and Cara Dowling, Ben Sanders, Benjamin Payne, Benji Blakeway, Bindle, Bishy93, Biddles 999999, Bivdub, Brams, Brandon Frost, Brody Gibson, Burps Wimbledon, Carl Hanna, Cerberus Arms, Colby, Contrafair, Cult of Lita, Daniel Chernovsky, Dapney, David Fromke, David Harpstrite, Dazed Clockwork, Do Vampire Cummies Taste Like Iron? Forgot about that one. Dongs.exe. Another classic. Dr. Grimbeard's Dino Nuggy Suppository Surprise, Electric Crowbar, Eudiptes, Fix My Brain, Game is Good, Gaming with Clarp Tarp, General Klazara, Ghoul Baby Bond, Goth Hunter Cass, Dark and Streams #2 fan, Haley Bobella, Hey Would Ya Blow Me, Hitoshi-san, Holy Christ Grimby, I am infatuated with your writing and style of humor. I have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and putty. INTJ loves her INTP, Irish Wristwatch, Irish Wristwatch, Irish Wristwatch, Jack Hodgkinson, Jack Hodgkinson, Jake Desi, Jake Raynor, Jeff Ladd, Jesse James, June Choi, Jordan Balzano, Joshua David, Khalil Corey, Captain Ketchup, Karagera, Lori Kubri, Leland Miliokis, Leopold Gloom, Leshka, M. Macdeath, Mandalore Gaming, Marauding Fraud, Marcus Klassen, Max Cohen, Max the Based Plant Protogen, MCR, Micah J. Best, Michael Parks, Miles Phillips, Mitochondria Chitomandria, More Sharks, Mr. Ducky Quack, Mystical Lint, Name Requires DLC, Nick Hill, Nick Hooper, Nick Timmons, Noel M, Nuclear Sun, Noel Rom, Oliver Marshall, Opichi Kostra, Origami Zergling, Paul Blart Mulgoth, Paul Fierce, Remy Pan, Replicant, Richard Bingus, Rising Existential Bread, Ruivi Somem, Samijima, Scarlet, Scofflaw, The Sussiest Baka D, Serge Ram, Shadenon, Shade, Salatixo, Snuggly Trap, Zofil Fucht, Zofil Abeglaube vor dem Wieden Gosshamen Tiere. And I've always said that. Sob Akaduka, Startide, Team R, The Supervisor, Tutint Meenage Needle Teedle. That's pretty good. Varioth, Vilmar Valthorsen, Vincent Cronin, Werewolf Bar Mitzvah, Spooky Scary, Boys Becoming Men, Men Becoming Wolves. Au, Wolf Chalice Logician. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like a phrase you would say to a UNATCO agent to make them explode. Zanga PF, Zienek Benez, and Ziwawe for being a patron. And the rest. Thanks again for watching the video, and thank you if you voted on the poll I put on Discord for the next game I do a video about, the winner of which was Squaresoft's Vagrant Story. So look forward to that, but give me a second to play this very long game. Good lord. Anyway, I can feel myself like separating from reality slowly, so maybe I should start wrapping this up. I appreciate you, appreciate all your support. Your support allows me to make all this garbage you just consumed, and there's more of it on the way, and that's exciting. I guess we all know the healthy thing I should do right now. Finish up this coffee. Why did I do this? Got so much content burning in my skull. Oh, I forget if I mentioned this ever. But there's a patron-only video that's like an hour-ish long where I talk about a documentary about vampires. It's a weird premise, but you'll get it when you watch it. What was I talking about? Yeah, whatever. I'll see you later.
This track rips. I'm about to open up this pit, Jen. Someone will be chosen. Where are the posers? I'm doling out dirt naps.